Good afternoon. It's Monday. It's 1 o'clock. Guess where we are? The Deal Doctor Livestream. Welcome. Glad you could join us. Even though it's a great day to be out golfing or just about anything, I hope you just give me a few minutes to share a few thoughts with you today, and then you can be on your way. A lot's been happening in the last weeks, months. 2020 has been a pretty unusual year. I think we would all agree with that. Probably one of the most unusual years that I've experienced. And there's a phrase that's going around that's become a cliche, and that's our new normal. And I want to challenge that phrase. I want to challenge it publicly, because there is no such thing as a new normal, in my opinion, and the opinion of some others that I've spoken with about this. There is never a new normal, because there's always going to be change. There's going to be change in the future. There's always been change before, and we are going through a seminal moment in our society where we may see changes occurring on many levels, in many areas. As we've seen over the past 3 months, we have seen debate and discussion over stay-at-home orders, over social distancing orders from both the state and federal government. And some people have agreed with them. Some people have disagreed with them. Some people have ignored them. And I will suggest that regardless of whether you agree or disagree with them, it's the law, and we have to abide by the law. Now, we can certainly debate with our congresspeople whether it should be the law, whatever it might be. But as we move forward after COVID, and as we see change in our society, we have to remain conscious that change is going to be inevitable, and more than ever in my lifetime, I don't believe we're going to see a new normal for quite some time, because I think there's going to be a lot of evolution going on, both at a society level and a business level, and whatever side you're on, there's going to be change. The change is going to come from it. I give an example. In the 1960s, I was still young. I know, it's a long time ago. Enough, Dom, you don't need to comment, okay? Anyway, the point is that people were arguing about seatbelts in cars. Some people were so convinced that seatbelts in cars would save lives that they installed their own. Some people asked the car companies to put seatbelts in cars, and the car companies refused, saying it was going to raise the price of cars. Ultimately, the government required that they put seatbelts in cars, and some people were in favor of it, and other people were opposed to it, saying it was an infringement of rights and overreach by the federal government. Then we saw motorcycle helmets. Eventually, people were required to put their seatbelts on. Even more discussion, more debate about whether that was right or wrong. Motorcycle helmets, same thing. It was required by law that you had to wear a motorcycle helmet. People were all up in arms. And eventually, the law changed, and there was some middle ground where if you paid extra money to cover the insurance liability, and I believe there were some classes or certifications required, you got to ride your motorcycle without a helmet. So, again, there's been change. in every aspect of our society, regardless of whether you agree with it or not, we have to operate within the laws. And we have to be very careful about that. But that's not exactly what I want to talk about today. How is all of this change that we are experiencing, that we are witnessing, how is that going to change the way you do business? What are your practices going to be moving forward from today and a year from now and 2 years from now? What are you going to do differently, if anything? Are you going to go back to doing business exactly the way you did before? Or are you going to put some changes into place? As Mary says, she pointed out that she's going to wear gloves, masks for the rest of the year. I can appreciate that, and I probably will too. Is everybody going to do that? No, of course not. Some won't do it because it's no longer required, and they feel safe in going out and operating without those things as the executive order expires and so on. Other people are going to flat out ignore it and violate the law. Please don't be one of those people. We don't want to have the news cameras roll up and have a 5-star logo in front of you as you're trying to explain why it was okay to break the law. We're still under some restrictions, so let's respect those. But that's not the only place that change is going to occur. I think that in the last 2 weeks, we have seen change on a social level, or the desire for change. And again, there are two sides of the story. I'm not here to take sides on either side, but I'm saying that we are going to see some residual effect of what has been happening over the course of the last 2 weeks. How are we going to interact with our clients and with other people's clients to make them feel safe, to make them feel valued, and to make sure that we are abiding by the law? I will tell you that I know, without a doubt, that there have been civil rights violations which have occurred in the last year. As it regards housing, that's breaking the law. And I encourage everyone to take a hard look at how they're doing business and what they're doing when they go out into the community and work with all ethnicities and religions equally. It is really important that we are place an equal hand on our clients, regardless of their ethnicity and religion and color of the skin and so on. It's very, very important that we operate cleanly and within the law. Again, I don't want to stop there. I want this conversation, hopefully, to continue with thoughts about how we're going to conduct our business. Are you going to go back into the office right away? If not, are you going to go back into the office at all? Are you planning to change your business model so that from now on you're going to interact with people online or by FaceTime or Zoom meetings before you go out and show them houses? For years, I have advocated for come into the office meetings, CITO, C-I-T-O, come into the office. If somebody calls me to see a listing of mine or even to see someone else's listing, I require of them. It's not a request, it's a requirement, because I value my safety and I value my time. And I want to know that they're qualified. Now, not all agents are going to operate that way, and that's okay. Some will go out and show one or two houses. Others will show a number of houses until they find one, gambling essentially that they're going to get a commission. And sometimes disappointed when they don't. So it's up to you. For me, I ask that they come into the office and have a conversation in person, eyeball to eyeball, so that I can explain the process. I can walk through the purchase agreement with them and all of the elements of the purchase process before we go out and start looking at houses and carpeting and colors on the wall. That's because I value my time, and I think I'm not going to get out of my chair unless I have a qualified buyer that I know is able to buy a home and is serious about it and is going to work with me specifically. And I may give them a couple of houses to look at, but in that very initial meeting, I talk with them about, I'll show you a couple of houses. If you feel comfortable with me as your real estate agent, then I'm going to expect that we get together and do a buyer's agency agreement. And if you don't, no problem, we'll part company and be on our way. I'm not going to go out and show anybody 10, 20 houses without a buyer's agency contract. I'm simply not going to do it. That's my choice. And we each get to make that choice as independent contractors. Today, however, imagine this. Instead of having that come into the office meeting, what if we had a FaceTime meeting or a Zoom meeting with a potential buyer or even a potential seller, as we have been doing for the last few months with those people that we can't interact with, that we've been prohibited from interacting with? Is that going to be our new method of working with people for now? For the future? Maybe. Maybe we've been forced into adapting to a completely new way of doing business, where we have a Zoom meeting with a seller or a buyer to qualify them, to determine whether or not their house or their ability to buy is sufficient for us to spend our time on. From a health and safety standpoint, I agree with Mary. Until there's a vaccine, I personally am not going to go out without a mask and show houses. That's my choice. It may not be your choice. And so long as we are operating within the law, that's perfectly okay. Let's see, what else do we have? Do you have any questions yet?
No.
Okay. I think one of the things that we are going to be challenged with, again, from a civil rights issue, is we may see more testers out there. And we have to be very conscious in treating everyone equally. It is, and because I think there's going to be a higher likelihood that you may be caught if you're not. But more than that, it's doing the right thing. It's just basic to being human. So I think that we're going to see probably more enforcement or more investigation than we've seen in the past. And I think you need to be ready for it. And you need to be very conscious about the way that you interact with people and be kind. Kindness and respect is what everybody wants and hopes for. So no matter who it is, be kind, be respectful. Let's see, what else? Post your thoughts here, if you will, because I went through this a little bit more quickly than I had expected. Again, there's really not a lot of new information other than to reiterate that there is always going to be change. There's never that we're never going to become stagnant into this sort of new normal state. That if you want to use that phrase, that could last 10 minutes, as we've seen with the executive orders coming out. We haven't known what is going to happen on any given day, and for that moment, that's the law, that's the norm, and then the next day it may change. So there is no such thing as a new normal. There's change. Always has been, there always will be. So I don't know that I have much more to say than that. We are running into questions of agency. I'm going to shift gears and talk about when you have a listing and you have a buyer who contacts you, and you have the choice to remain in the seller's position, which is exactly what we want you to do. Avoid dual agency. How do you do that and still collect the buyer's side of the commission? Well, if you look at the listing contract, it gives you the total commission. It goes on to explain that if somebody else brings a buyer, another broker or another designated agent within 5-star brings the buyer, that you're going to share that commission. But nowhere does it say that if you sell it yourself, unless you have it in a separate clause, that if you sell it yourself, that you're going to give up any of that 6 or 7% or 5%, whatever it is, commission, that you get the whole thing. You don't have to go into buyer agency. You can stay in the seller's position. But if you choose for some reason to go into buyer's agency, then you have to get both parties' permission to do dual agency and have them all sign a dual agency agreement before you can proceed, before you can present an offer. It's not that the agent doesn't get to make the call. We don't get to make the decision. It's our clients, a buyer and a seller, who make the decision. And we have to have a buyer agency contract signed by the buyer and the listing contract signed by the seller in order to go into dual agency. If we find a house that is not on the market and we want to sell it, we have a buyer, we can use a compensation agreement and outline who's going to pay for what, who's going to pay the 295s. In this case, each party would pay a 295 broker admin fee, and who's going to pay the commission. Seller might pay it, buyer might pay it, they might split it, doesn't matter. But the compensation agreement spells out how that is going to be done. We don't need a listing contract or a buyer agency contract in that situation, and we don't need to. We can always mark transaction coordinator, where we don't have an agency relationship with either party. Be careful, though, that if you mark transaction coordinator or dual agency, that you really don't have a bias toward one versus the other. For example, if I go out and I'm showing houses to my brother-in-law, and I show them a house that's off the market, not on the market, I have an allegiance to my brother-in-law more than I do this complete stranger who has a for sale by owner sign up in their yard. No judge in the world is going to believe that I was acting completely hands-off without favoring my brother-in-law through this transaction, either as a transaction coordinator or as a dual agent, in which in both cases you can't give advice to one party over the other, which may give an advantage to one over the other. So in that situation, where I'm working with my brother-in-law, I would get him under a buyer agency contract and then go out and show him for sale by owner homes. And regardless of who's going to pay the commission, I would spell that out in a compensation agreement. So be very careful about agency. We want to, especially listing agents, we want to make sure that if you get the buyer, if you contact a buyer and you're going to write up an offer and there's no other agent involved, that you collect 2 broker admin fees and you can get your full commission without any further documentation other than the disclosure regarding agency relationships, disclosing to the buyer that you are working for the seller or that you have no buyer agency agreement with the buyer. I hope that's clear. And with that, I think I'm going to call it unless, oh, we have a question. Yay.
Just one.
Just one.
Cut it down.
Kelly, give me just a second to put, it's not.
It's not showing up.
There it is. I jumped in a few minutes late, so sorry you may have gone over this. Are we required to wear masks, or is it a recommendation and up to the sellers and buyers? I honestly don't know. It's changed so much and so rapidly, I couldn't tell you. I hope that maybe somebody else can jump in here, maybe Eric or Paul. I believe that it's still up to the seller to establish protocol until the stay-at-home order is fully lifted. I believe that. I'm not going to swear to it. But if somebody has that answer for Kelly, I'm going to defer to them because, as I said, we were still getting changes to the law, it seemed, over the weekend. So I'm going to hand that off a bit. Sorry, Kelly, I can't give you a firm answer on that. But Paul or Eric probably could. We'll see if we can get them to weigh in here. Okay, so change is inevitable. New normal is a cliche. We're always going to see change, and we're seeing it every day, every hour, it seems. So be ready to adapt and build your business model accordingly, whatever works for you. And I think that pretty much sums up what I had to say today. So thanks for joining. I'll see you next week.